June 18, 2024. Justin Timberlake had just finished dinner with friends in Sag Harbor, a quiet coastal town on the eastern edge of New York. No screaming fans, no flashing cameras, no sold-out arenas. Just another evening. Or at least that's what it seemed. He climbed into his gray BMW, started the engine, and drove away into the night. A few minutes later, red and blue lights appeared behind him. A police officer was signaling him to pull over. At that moment, Justin Timberlake had no idea that this routine traffic stop was about to become one of the biggest controversies of his career. According to police reports, his vehicle allegedly failed to stop properly at a stop sign and was observed drifting out of its lane, enough to attract attention, enough to trigger a traffic stop. When officers approached the vehicle, they reported signs of possible impairment, red eyes, slowed reactions, and behavior they considered unusual. Justin was asked to perform field sobriety tests, the kind of tests commonly used when officers suspect a driver may be under the influence. What happened next quickly became national news. Justin Timberlake was arrested on suspicion of driving while intoxicated, a charge that has damaged countless public figures before him. Because a DUI story is never just about driving, it's a media nightmare. Within hours, major news organizations began reporting the story. CNN, NBC, BBC, Fox News, People, TMZ, Variety. Everywhere people looked, they saw the same headline. Justin Timberlake, the man who sold millions of records, the man who won multiple Grammy Awards, the man who spent decades building one of the most successful careers in entertainment, now appearing in headlines for an entirely different reason. Then came the image, the booking photo, one photograph, one moment, and suddenly the internet exploded. Because in that picture, there was no superstar, no polished performer, no Hollywood icon, just a man sitting inside a police station, facing a crisis he could not control. Social media reacted instantly. Millions of views, millions of comments, thousands of jokes, thousands of opinions, thousands of people deciding exactly who Justin Timberlake was based on a single night. But the arrest itself wasn't the worst part, not even close. Because the internet wasn't interested in discussing only what happened that evening. The internet wanted more. It wanted history. It wanted old controversies, old relationships, old mistakes, old wounds. Stories many people believed had been buried years ago. Within 24 hours, a traffic stop in a small New York town had transformed into a full-scale media storm. And what nobody realized yet was that this story was no longer just about an arrest. It was about to reopen some of the most controversial chapters of Justin Timberlake's entire career. In the age of social media, a scandal is never just a scandal, it's a doorway into everything that came before. And Justin Timberlake was about to learn that the hard way. As news of the arrest spread across the country, millions of people began doing what the internet always does. They searched, they remembered, they revisited old stories. Stories many believed had been forgotten long ago. At first, the conversation focused on the arrest itself. Was Justin actually intoxicated? Was this simply a mistake? Was the media exaggerating the situation? But then, the discussion began to shift, and one name suddenly appeared everywhere. Britney Spears. Almost overnight, old interviews resurfaced, old television appearances, old magazine covers, old tabloid headlines. For younger audiences, it was a history lesson. For everyone else, it was a reminder of one of the most famous celebrity relationships of the early 2000s. Back then, Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears were America's golden couple. Young, beautiful, successful. Everywhere they went, the cameras followed. Every move became a headline. Every appearance became an event. And when the relationship ended, the breakup became a media spectacle, one that would shape public perception for years. Many people remembered how Justin emerged from that chapter. His career continued rising. His music dominated the charts. His popularity grew even stronger. Meanwhile, Britney's life became increasingly chaotic under relentless public scrutiny. For years, many people accepted that version of the story. But times had changed. Public attitudes had changed. And after Britney's memoir reignited debate about that period of her life, many people began looking at those events differently. Suddenly, old criticisms returned, old questions returned, and old frustrations returned. Was Justin treated more kindly by the media? Did he benefit from double standards? Did the public judge Britney more harshly than they judged him? The internet didn't agree on the answers. But millions of people were asking the questions again. And then, another name resurfaced. Janet Jackson. For many Americans, those two words immediately brought back a single memory. Super Bowl 28, the halftime show. One of the most controversial moments in television history. More than 20 years had passed. Yet the debate never fully disappeared. Because many people believed the consequences had never been shared equally. Janet Jackson's career suffered enormously. Radio support declined. Television appearances became more limited. Opportunities disappeared. Meanwhile, Justin Timberlake continued climbing higher. More albums, more awards, more success, more influence. Over time, the Super Bowl controversy became a symbol of a larger conversation. A conversation about fame, gender, power, and accountability. Now, with Justin facing a new controversy, many people saw an opportunity to revisit that discussion. Not everyone agreed. Some argued that it was unfair, that people should not be permanently defined by events from decades earlier, that individuals can grow, change, learn, move forward. Others disagreed. They believed those chapters had never truly been resolved, never fully addressed, never honestly confronted, and because of that they remained unfinished, waiting beneath the surface, waiting for a moment to return. The arrest in Sag Harbor became that moment. Ironically, the biggest threat to Justin's image wasn't the arrest itself. It was what the arrest triggered. Because suddenly, people weren't examining one night. They were examining an entire career. Every controversy, every relationship, every decision, every public moment, every perceived mistake. And once that process begins, it becomes incredibly difficult to control, because public opinion rarely focuses on one event. It builds narratives. It connects dots, whether those connections are fair or not. Justin Timberlake was no longer being judged only for what happened in June 2024. He was being judged through the lens of everything that came before. And that made the crisis far more dangerous. Because at this point, he wasn't simply fighting a legal problem. He was fighting for control of his own story. And the internet had already started writing a very different version of it. There was a reason the arrest shocked so many people. Not because Justin Timberlake was the first celebrity accused of driving under the influence. Hollywood has seen countless stories like that before. Actors, musicians, athletes, television stars. Every year, another famous name appears in a police report. Another headline dominates the news cycle. Another scandal captures public attention. But Justin Timberlake felt different, because for decades, he wasn't the celebrity people expected to see in that situation. In the eyes of the public, he was one of the safe ones, the reliable ones, the polished ones, the stars who always seemed to stay in control, and that image wasn't built overnight. It started long before the Grammys, long before the sold-out arenas, long before the Hollywood movies, back when Justin was just a kid, a child performer trying to find his place in the entertainment industry. He appeared on the Mickey Mouse Club, alongside future stars like Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Ryan Gosling, and several others who would eventually become household names. Even then, people noticed something special: confidence, charisma, natural stage presence, the kind of qualities that can't be taught, the kind that often separates future stars from everyone else. Then came times NSYNC, and everything changed. The group exploded in popularity. Their albums sold millions of copies. Their concerts sold out around the world. Fans screamed their names wherever they went. For an entire generation, they became one of the defining acts of pop music. And at the center of it all was Justin Timberlake. Young, talented, photogenic, marketable, the perfect pop star. But success inside a boy band is one thing. Building a solo career is something entirely different. Many artists try. Very few succeed. History is filled with former group members who disappeared once they stepped away from the spotlight of a successful band. Justin wasn't one of them. When he launched his solo career, He didn't merely survive, he dominated. Justified became a massive success. Then came Future Sex, Love Sounds. And suddenly, Justin Timberlake wasn't just a former boy band member anymore. He was one of the biggest artists in the world. Hit after hit followed. Cry Me a River, Sexy Back, My Love, Mirrors, Can't Stop the Feeling. Songs that defined eras. Songs that shaped pop culture. Songs that helped transform him into a global superstar. Then Hollywood came calling. And once again, Justin succeeded where many musicians failed. He transitioned into acting, appearing in films like The Social Network, Friends with Benefits, and several other major projects. The public began seeing him differently. Not just as a singer, not just as a performer, but as an entertainer capable of succeeding almost anywhere. Music, film, television, business. Few celebrities managed to build that kind of versatility. Even fewer managed to sustain it for decades. Yet somehow, Justin did. While many stars from his generation faded away, he remained consistent, successful, relevant, and perhaps most importantly, trustworthy. That word mattered, because trust is incredibly valuable in entertainment. Brands invest in trust. Studios invest in trust. Advertisers invest in trust. Audiences invest in trust. People support celebrities they believe they understand. People support celebrities they believe they can rely on. For years, Justin Timberlake became one of those figures. The guy who seemed professional. The guy who seemed stable. The guy who always knew how to navigate fame. At least that was the perception. And perception can be powerful. But it can also be fragile, because the more perfect an image appears, the more vulnerable it becomes when cracks begin to show. Audiences expect mistakes from rebels. They expect controversy from troublemakers. They expect scandal from celebrities known for chaos. But Justin Timberlake never fit that category. And that's exactly why the arrest felt so significant. It challenged expectations. It disrupted a carefully maintained image. It forced people to look again, to reconsider, to question assumptions they had carried for years. Was the public image completely accurate? Was it incomplete? Had people simply seen what they wanted to see? Those questions suddenly became impossible to ignore. But perhaps the timing made everything even worse, because this didn't happen when Justin was struggling. It didn't happen during a career collapse. It didn't happen while he was fading from relevance. It happened during a comeback. A major world tour. A major return to the spotlight. An opportunity to remind audiences exactly why he had remained famous for so long. Instead, people weren't talking about the music. They weren't talking about the performances. They weren't talking about the comeback. They were talking about a mugshot. And sometimes, one photograph can become more powerful than an entire marketing campaign. One image can rewrite an entire narrative. One moment can overshadow years of careful reputation management. For Justin Timberlake, that moment had arrived, and the consequences were only beginning. Because the deeper people looked into his story, the more questions they started asking. Not only about his past, not only about his image, but about what actually happened on that night in Sag Harbor, and whether the story was really as simple as it first appeared. June 18, 2024, just after midnight. The streets of Sag Harbor were unusually quiet. This wasn't Manhattan. It wasn't Los Angeles. It wasn't a city crowded with flashing cameras and paparazzi waiting around every corner. Sag Harbor is different. A small coastal town, peaceful, esclusivi. The kind of place where celebrities often go when they want to escape attention. That evening, Justin Timberlake had been having dinner with friends at a local restaurant. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing suggested that the next few minutes would become international news. According to official police reports, Justin left the restaurant and drove away in his BMW. A short time later, an officer noticed the vehicle. The report stated that the car allegedly failed to stop properly at a stop sign. It was also observed drifting out of its lane. Small violations. The kind of thing that leads to routine traffic stops every day across America. But this stop was about to become anything but routine. The officer activated the patrol car's lights. Justin pulled over. What happened next would soon be repeated by every major news organization in the country. When the officer approached the vehicle, He reported noticing several signs that raised concern. According to court documents, Justin's eyes appeared bloodshot and glassy. His reactions seemed slower than expected. His behavior was described as consistent with possible impairment. At that point, the situation escalated. Justin was asked to participate in field sobriety tests, the standard evaluations officers use when they suspect a driver may be under the influence. Tests designed to measure balance, coordination, and cognitive response. Within minutes, a simple traffic stop had become a criminal investigation. Then came the moment that changed everything. Justin Timberlake was placed under arrest on suspicion of driving while intoxicated. The news traveled with astonishing speed, because this wasn't just another driver. This wasn't just another arrest. This was Justin Timberlake, one of the most recognizable entertainers in the world, a Grammy-winning musician, an actor, a global celebrity, a man whose career had spanned more than 3 decades, now sitting inside a police station in a small New York town. For many people, the contrast was impossible to ignore. One night earlier, he was performing in arenas packed with thousands of fans. Now, he was facing criminal charges. But the arrest itself wasn't the only detail attracting attention. Another moment quickly became part of the story. According to reports widely circulated in the media, Justin allegedly expressed concern about how the incident might affect his tour. Different outlets described the exchange in slightly different ways, but the message remained largely the same. In that moment, the reality of the situation may have started to sink in, because celebrities understand something most people never have to think about. A mistake doesn't remain private. A mistake becomes news, a headline, a viral story, a permanent part of public record. Then came the image, the booking photo, and suddenly the story gained a face. No stage lighting, no concert crowd, no carefully crafted public appearance. Just a man staring directly into a camera. For years, Justin Timberlake had mastered the art of public image. He rarely appeared out of control, rarely found himself at the center of major scandals, rarely gave the public reasons to question his judgment. But now, that control was gone, at least temporarily. The image spread everywhere. News websites, social media feeds, television broadcasts, entertainment blogs. Millions of people saw it within hours. Millions more discussed it, analyzed it, mocked it, shared it, and transformed it into one of the defining celebrity images of 2024. But amid all the headlines, another question slowly emerged. Was this simply a single bad decision, a momentary lapse in judgment, or was it evidence of something deeper? Because behind every public scandal, there is usually a private reality the audience never fully sees. The pressure, the expectations, the exhaustion, the constant scrutiny. Justin Timberlake wasn't only an entertainer. He was a husband, a father, a businessman, a performer in the middle of a major world tour, someone carrying enormous professional and personal responsibilities. And sometimes the moments that look like sudden collapses from the outside are actually the result of pressures building for much longer than anyone realizes. Whether that was true in Justin's case, only he truly knows. But one thing was certain. The story was no longer about a traffic stop. It had become something much larger. A debate about accountability, celebrity culture, public image, and the fragile relationship between fame and trust. And as the media storm continued to grow, Justin Timberlake faced a new challenge. Not the legal case, not the headlines, but the possibility that one photograph might overshadow an entire comeback. There is an unwritten rule in entertainment. The public can forget a song, they can forget a movie, they can even forget a performance, but they rarely forget a scandal. And that was exactly the reality Justin Timberlake faced after Sag Harbor. Because only weeks before the arrest, the conversation surrounding Justin had been very different. The focus was supposed to be his comeback, his music, his performances, his future. The Forget Tomorrow World Tour was meant to symbolize a new chapter, a return to center stage, a reminder that Justin Timberlake remained one of the biggest entertainers of his generation. For months, his team had carefully built that narrative. The veteran performer returns. The global superstar is back. The next chapter begins. But then, everything changed, almost overnight. News outlets stopped talking about the concerts, stopped talking about the music, stopped talking about the comeback. Instead, every headline seemed to focus on the same thing: the arrest, the mugshot, the allegations, the police report. The internet wasn't discussing set lists. It wasn't discussing choreography. It wasn't discussing new songs. It was discussing a traffic stop in a small New York town. And that is what makes reputation crises so dangerous. They don't simply create bad publicity. They replace the story you wanted people to hear. For years, Justin had carefully managed his public image. He understood media. He understood branding. He understood how celebrity narratives are built. But now, he no longer controlled the narrative. The internet did. And the internet can be ruthless. Within days, social media was flooded with reactions. Memes appeared everywhere. Parodies spread across platforms. Late-night hosts joked about the arrest. Commentators analyzed every detail. Reaction videos accumulated millions of views. For many people, it was entertainment. Just another celebrity controversy. Just another viral story. Just another trending topic. But for the person at the center of the storm, the consequences were far more serious. Because every joke extended the lifespan of the scandal. Every meme introduced the story to a new audience. Every viral post reinforced the same image. The mugshot, the arrest, the controversy. And gradually, that image began overshadowing everything else. Even the tour, even the music, even decades of accomplishments. This is the brutal reality of modern fame. Success is cumulative. Scandal is immediate. An artist may spend 20 years building a reputation. One headline can dominate the public conversation for months. That doesn't erase the accomplishments, but it changes what people talk about. And in entertainment, attention is everything. Meanwhile, industry observers began watching carefully. Promoters watched, sponsors watched, business partners watched, media executives watched. Not because they knew exactly what had happened, but because perception matters. Companies fear controversy. Brands fear uncertainty. Investors fear reputational risk. And when a celebrity becomes the center of a public storm, everyone pays attention. That doesn't mean doors immediately close. But it does mean questions begin appearing. Questions about image. Questions about marketability. Questions about public trust. And trust, once damaged, can be surprisingly difficult to rebuild. Justin's team appeared to understand this. Rather than launching aggressive public attacks, they largely remained measured, careful, controlled, focused. The strategy seemed obvious. Avoid making the story bigger. Avoid emotional confrontations. Allow the legal process to unfold. Because experienced crisis managers know something important. Sometimes, the fastest way to prolong a controversy is to keep feeding it. Yet there was one problem no public relations team could immediately solve: disappointment. Many fans weren't simply reacting to the arrest, they were reacting to who had been arrested. Justin Timberlake, the polished star, the professional performer, the reliable celebrity, the man many people had admired for decades. Public expectations can be a strange thing. The higher they rise, the harder the fall feels. Audiences often forgive rebels for acting recklessly. They expect unpredictability. They expect controversy. But they judge role models differently, because role models are held to a different standard. And for much of his career, whether he wanted the role or not, Justin Timberlake had become one. That is why the reaction felt so intense. Not because the incident was unprecedented, but because it conflicted with the image people believed they knew. And suddenly, a larger question began emerging. Was this the beginning of a permanent decline, or merely a temporary setback? Because Hollywood history offers examples of both. Some stars never recover. Others return stronger than ever. Some scandals define a career. Others become little more than a footnote. At this point, nobody knew which path Justin Timberlake would follow. But one thing was becoming increasingly clear. His biggest challenge wasn't happening in a courtroom. It was happening in the court of public opinion. And that battle had only just begun. Hollywood loves success stories. But if there's one thing Hollywood loves even more, it's a comeback. The entertainment industry has always been filled with people who fell, people who disappointed fans, People who made mistakes. People who found themselves at the center of public controversy. And somehow, many of them found a way back. The question now is simple. Can Justin Timberlake do the same? To answer that question, we first have to understand the nature of the crisis itself. Because not every scandal is the same. Some scandals permanently destroy careers. Some reveal behavior the public simply cannot forgive. Some create consequences that last forever. Others become chapters, painful chapters, embarrassing chapters, but chapters nonetheless. And at least for now, many observers believe Justin's situation falls into the second category. The arrest damaged his image. There is no denying that. It generated negative headlines, negative publicity, negative attention. It created questions. It created doubt. It created disappointment. But it did not erase 30 years of accomplishments. It did not erase the music. It did not erase the awards. It did not erase the cultural impact. And it certainly did not erase the millions of fans who supported him long before the controversy began. That doesn't mean people will forget. They probably won't. The internet rarely forgets. But forgetting and forgiving are very different things. History has shown that audiences are often willing to forgive public figures, but usually under certain conditions. Responsibility, honesty, growth. People don't expect perfection. They never truly have. What they expect is accountability. Not carefully written statements, not public relations campaigns, not damage control, but genuine accountability. The willingness to acknowledge mistakes, the willingness to learn from them, the willingness to move forward differently. And rebuilding trust takes time, a lot of time, because trust is unlike fame. Fame can arrive overnight. Trust cannot. Trust is built slowly, conversation by conversation, decision by decision, year by year. And once it is damaged, it rarely returns quickly. Justin Timberlake understands that reality better than most. He has spent nearly his entire life in the public eye. He understands how audiences think, how media cycles work, how public perception changes, and perhaps most importantly, how difficult it can be to earn back confidence once it has been shaken. But there is another factor worth considering. Justin Timberlake today is not the same person he was 20 years ago. He is no longer the young star from Time's NSYNC, no longer the rising solo artist trying to prove himself, no longer the young celebrity navigating sudden fame. Today he is a husband, a father, a businessman, an established entertainer, a man who has experienced nearly every level of success the industry can offer. And perhaps that changes the meaning of failure, because failure at this stage of life is different. It's no longer about chart positions. It's no longer about awards. It's no longer about record sales. It becomes something more personal, more reflective, more human. Questions about judgment, questions about responsibility, questions about character. Maybe that's why this story resonated with so many people. Not because Justin Timberlake is famous, but because underneath the fame, the situation feels familiar. A person makes a mistake becomes public, the consequences arrive. And suddenly, everything they spent years building feels vulnerable. In that sense, the story is larger than celebrity culture. It is larger than entertainment news. It is larger than one arrest. It is about the fragile nature of reputation itself. How difficult it is to build, how easy it is to damage, and how uncertain recovery can be. Because reputation behaves much like glass. It takes years to shape, years to polish, years to strengthen, but only seconds to crack. The question is no longer whether a crack appeared. The crack is already there. The real question is what happens next. Will it fade with time? Will it grow larger? Will audiences move on? Will trust return? Only time can answer those questions. The tour will eventually end. The headlines will eventually fade. The internet will eventually find another story, another controversy, another celebrity. The cycle always continues. But for Justin Timberlake, the night in Sag Harbor will remain part of the story, alongside the Grammys, the hit records, the sold-out arenas, the blockbuster performances, the successes, and now the controversy. All of it existing together, all of it forming the same legacy. Perhaps the greatest irony of all is that Justin Timberlake spent decades creating unforgettable moments for audiences around the world. Yet the moment he may wish people would forget has become one of the most unforgettable moments of his career. That is the price of fame. The spotlight magnifies success, but it magnifies mistakes too. And sometimes, the mistakes become impossible to separate from the story itself. In the end, this was never just a story about an arrest. It was never just a story about one night in New York. It was never just a story about a mugshot. It was a story about image, expectation, accountability, and the complicated relationship between fame and trust. Because sooner or later, every public figure faces the same challenge. The moment when the image they created collides with the reality of who they are. And when that happens, the public decides whether they are willing to believe again. As for Justin Timberlake, that decision remains in the hands of millions of people watching from the outside, and only time will reveal the final verdict.